What is up, Saints fans? Inside Black and Gold coming at you. Steve Geller and Jeff Nowak with another edition as we get ready for regular season action. Not this weekend, but the next weekend, Sunday, September 7th. The Arizona Cardinals coming to the Dome, and we know who the quarterback will be. We pretty much have the roster set and practice squad set as well. I'm sure some jostling is still going to be happening, but for everything we know right now, it's pretty much locked in on what we have going forward with this roster. A few trades have been made, and some interesting non-adds to the practice squad, if you should say.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of the busier cut down weeks in terms of players that were not here for all of training camp are now here, right? Like, that's always where you're like, you spend all year projecting, or at least I do, like, oh, this is my first roster projection, my second roster projection, my final roster projection. And then suddenly there are 4 players that I didn't account for that are now on this roster that are just like, oh, yeah, okay, well, they have to fit in somewhere, and the other ones are gone. This is kind of the open week before, the start of the regular season. So at least we don't have to talk about a preseason game, but we do have kind of this just weird 3-day window with nothing. The Saints players and staff have a couple days off here. I think they're kind of use this, like they have a couple days of practice and then they kind of just reset and get into their first official game week, which starts on Monday. And that's when you're into the regular season game week. But we haven't done kind of a full episode to kind of catch up on the 53-man roster. I'm not going to sit here 4 days after Cutdown Day and name all 53 names. I think what we're going to do is kind of go through our biggest takeaways on offense, defense. That'll be in the second and third segments. We'll also get into, okay, what were our biggest surprises? What are our biggest concerns going forward? Are there still positions this team needs to consider addressing as we go into the regular season? But that's our first segment. We're going to get into kind of a rundown. We haven't done a rundown segment in a while, so I do want to do that. We had Drew Brees on WWL yesterday, so I thought he had some interesting takes on the situation around the team and what he's looking for. Always the optimist, Drew Brees is. So we'll get into that in the rundown. Also want to talk about, what were these trades? What were the waiver claims? Health updates as well. But before we get into that, just tell me, okay, how are you feeling? Got a week, nothing. You got LSU football tomorrow. Then we can start worrying about the Saints. I don't know. Like, I feel like people are more bummed out now than they were even going into training camp for some reason.
Really? Why?
I don't know. Like, I just think like the expectations, like I talked to a lot of people going into training camp and they're like, I think this team could be sneaky good. And now they're coming out and it's like, everyone seems to have settled around like, man, if they win 7 games, that's a huge victory.
I guess because what we saw training camp practices going and the preseason, the offensive struggles to put touchdowns on the board.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I think people would be more excited if it was Tyler Shough because of the mystery. And obviously, Kellen Moore came out this week. We haven't talked about it on the YouTube channel yet, but there is a podcast in the feed with myself and Mike Haas kind of breaking down that decision. So I'm not going to go into it kind of at length. But yeah, the Saints went with Spencer Rattler, and I'm not going to say I'm surprised by it because I've been on this since the beginning. Like, you can attest to this. I have not wavered one time that I thought Spencer Rattler was going to be the week 1 starter. And I've had people say like, hey, I want you to get on the podcast and tell me what you think about this. I'm like, here's the thing. I take pride in being consistent with my takes unless I have reason to change them. So, I mean, I'm going to just refer you back to 2 weeks ago me and 3 weeks ago me and a month ago me, because I was waiting for something to change my opinion. It just never did. So I don't think I need to lay down a bunch of new groundbreaking takes, because I just feel like the same way I felt before is kind of why I'm not surprised that this happened the way it did, right?
I think in short, Ty goes to the guy who's been around a little bit longer.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I think Ty is not necessarily what it is though. Like, I think it's we'll get into it. We'll get into it. I have a good bit to talk about just in general. But I do want to hit a quick break, come back here, go through some of the news because we could get stuck in that conversation for 20 minutes. And it's not a good way to start a podcast. So we'll have plenty. But again, I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. This is Inside Black and Gold, coming at you on a Friday morning, just over a week away from the Saints regular season opener. Woo! Let's get ready. Who dat? Coming back with a rundown segment. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller coming at you on a Friday morning, a little over a week away from the season opener. Not a huge amount of news this week, right? You've had some roster adjustments, some fluctuations, some trades, some claims, but like the actual like roster news or team news has been very, very subdued. But we will get through.
Unlike Dallas.
Right, exactly. Like you could have ground-shaking trades because the organization is just stupid. But no, and I'm glad you brought that up because like we can talk about the Saints and how they operate. Like I saw a lot of people like, why didn't they make this trade in March and April? Why did they make it today? And it's because the way they handled it made it so they didn't have a choice but to make that trade because the defining characteristic of the Cowboys of the 2020s is they like to get in games of chicken with their players. They like to get in games of contract chicken, but they are cowards at the end of the day. And they are always going to be the one that swerves first every single time. In most cases, the players have at least a strong enough relationship with the team that hasn't fractured that they're able to sign those guys. But in this case, Micah Parsons, like the Cowboys swerved off and Micah just like,
Michael
the wheel and said, I'm crashing into you because anyway.
Micah, not Michael.
Michael Parsons? Yeah,
Michael Parsons.
Michael Parsons. Anyway, so like, I make this point a lot, like good relationships with players is important and fostering a good relationship within your organization is important. Because like, just for an example, like one thing that happened this week was the Saints sent Jack Staley and Cedric Wilson down to the practice squad. They didn't want to cut those guys. They had to cut those guys because they made 2 waiver claims. And we're about to talk about Trey Palmer and Xavier Truss. Trey Palmer, former LSU wide receiver, went out to Nebraska, ended up being a 5th-round pick of the Bucs a few years back. You claimed him. You also claimed Xavier Truss, a UDFA that the Broncos had in camp this year. You got to make spaces for those guys. And do you have a good enough relationship with your veteran players that you can be like, hey, we're going to send you down to the practice squad. We still want you around. Don't go anywhere. And I think, and if you have a good relationship with those players, they'll be like, yeah, sure, let's get it done. Jack Stoll is the other one, if I didn't mention that name. And if you have a bad relationship with those players, they're going to be like, heck, screw y'all, I'm leaving. Like, I'm not going to get cut and then still allow you to just trot me out there as your practice squad pony. And like, I think that's the difference, right? Like when players don't want to play for your organization anymore, they have the ability. They can blow it up if they want. James Harden can wear a fat suit and get traded, right? Like Micah Parsons can lay on a table during the game and make it so awkward to the point that you can blow everything up. So players have that trump card. Your job as an organization, especially this day and age, is to make sure they don't use it because they don't want to burn that bridge because it's not worth it to them to burn the bridge. Once you make it to the point that they're like, screw it, I'm going to torch this thing. Once you turn him into Michael Thomas, there's no coming back from that, right?
Don't say his name. If you mention Michael Thomas's name, suddenly the comment section will be all about him.
You said it the second time. We have to be careful. If you say it a third time, he's going to show up right behind me. Oh no, it's Michael Thomas. Anyway, but no. So that's kind of an aside into you made a trade, and obviously we traded for Devon Vele last week. We already talked extensively about that, so we don't really need to go into it anymore. But you also made a trade for Awesome Richards, and I believe I'm saying that name right. Awesome, like everything is awesome. Awesome Richards.
I thought it was a seam, so okay, good.
I thought it was a seam too, but I think it's awesome. And It's easy to say because it's a word. So once we get it right, we'll get it right. So Awesome Richards, and like that became a necessary thing because Landon Young went down with an ankle injury. He's on season-ending injured reserve. Really a bummer for him, and not because he's irreplaceable, but like he's a good guy to have on your team. He's a good locker room guy. He's just a good dude. He's a player who could play 4 different positions on the line, right? And whether he's an elite player at those 4 positions, like the fact that you could comfortably say like, hey, we need a left guard this week. Can he do it? And like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So you don't have that anymore. And so you have a guy who's played 200 snaps at left tackle, right? He's primarily been a tackle. I don't know if he's going to factor in at guard. I think that's why you went and got Xavier Truss from the Broncos. I'm sure a guy you got a good review on from Sean Payton But yeah, so yeah, I mean, you have kind of your tackle depth, but can he be ready to go week 1, or do you have to rely on somebody else? They brought Easton Kilty back to the practice squad. That's kind of a mess. And so hopefully you have your starters in place for a good chunk of this season on the offensive line, because if not, it could get ugly fast.
But we know that's not going to be the case right off the bat with a guy like Trevor Penning, even with dealing with that toe issue.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a minute. I do want to have an injury update. But the other guy they claimed, Trey Palmer, wide receiver for the Bucs. And like, Saints fans should know Trey Palmer, because not only did he play at LSU, he's caught multiple touchdowns against the Saints, right? The one I remember vividly is, if you recall, 2023, Ike Adam. So this was the first Ike Adam, not this year's Ike Adam, but the previous iteration of the Ike Adam Saints. He, like, the Bucs are driving late in the first half, and Ike picks off a ball at the goal line, but because they had changed like the iteration of that rule where if your momentum carries you into the end zone, you don't get the ball at the 20, you get it at the 1. The Saints had to run a play from the 1-yard line, and Adam Prentice immediately fumbles it. And then the next play is Baker throwing a touchdown to Trey Palmer over Ike Adam so like that's the touchdown I remember. He also had a couple big plays in that second game of that season. So the Saints have got a good look at Trey Palmer. That's my point here. Like, they know who Trey Palmer is. And I thought it was a good addition. Like, he's another speed guy, but he's a little bigger. Like, he's a little bulkier. He's more physical. So I do think it kind of like Kellen Moore will talk about the basketball lineup. Like, I think he is a little different from a Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed. He's kind of that middle ground of a guy that you can throw out there and feel like he can be at least a neutral blocker, maybe not a plus blocker, but he's definitely not a minus blocker either.
And I'm just hoping that he's mainly going to be contributing special teams wise, because more and more I think about it, we talked about in those special situations for Rashid Shaheed, I just don't want Shaheed out there a ton doing return stuff when we need him so desperately at wide receiver.
Yeah, I don't see him being a punt returner, but I could see him returning kickoffs if you got to that stage. But he's also a guy that probably will be inactive week 1, because you're asking a lot of a guy to show up.
Right.
Like, you're already asking Devon Vele to do that, but Devon at least plays a position that I think translates a little better to learning it immediately. Like, there's certain things you're going to ask him to do that he'll be able to do this week. I don't know, like, for Trey to get on the field, it probably as an injury replacement early on in the season and as things go, but I think Devon is way more likely to be involved early. 2 guys got claimed elsewhere. That's DeMarco Jackson. He went to the Bears. Rico Payton went to the Giants. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire went to Kansas City, signed in their practice squad. And then there's 2 guys who ended up nowhere, and that's Cam Akers and Isaiah Foskey, which tells you everything you need to know about Isaiah Foskey in the sense of, like, the Saints have 2 open spots on their practice squad. When Kellen Moore was asked, hey, are you going to bring Isaiah Foskey back to the practice squad? He's kind of like, no. Like, I feel bad. Like, he just needs, I hope he lands somewhere. It's not going to be here.
He just goes in the long lineage of bad defensive end picks for this team.
Yeah, it's just another one. It's just another one on top of the list. But it is funny, like, people like the number 40 overall pick. I was freaking out this year. Like, you could have added like a no-brainer number 40 overall pick. They always work out. Not this time. And I think probably the reason you have 2 open practice squad spots is because you were probably looking at either DeMarco or Rico to fill one of those on the defensive side, and they're gone. And you were probably looking at one of Clyde or Cam to fill that on the offensive side, and they're gone. Marcus Yarns also hasn't signed anywhere, so they'll fill them. I don't think it's a huge priority at this point.
Okay, I thought Yarns was on the practice squad. That's my fault then.
No, they don't have a running back in the practice squad right now, but they do have 4 running backs on the roster, so it's not like they're thin at the position. Now, 2 other updates, health related. Trevor Penning, he's out of the walking boot, but I still think he's a decent way off from playing in a game. And this is what Kellen Moore had to say when he was asked about Trevor's timeline.
We'll see about the week 1 thing. We got a few days off this weekend, and then we'll kind of see what the timelines present themselves for these guys. But he's done an awesome job. He's out of the boot now, and so that's really cool to see. And so we'll just see how these timelines play out leading up to week 1.
Really disappointing. I mean, that's one of the big ones from the offseason for me. That's been a letdown. The fact that we were all excited about this move for Trevor. He was all on board with it and is thinking, all right, let's see what he can finally do at the guard spot. And still, an incomplete grade there. We haven't seen enough.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's going to play. It's not like he's out. Like the good news is, you had two guys land on IR to return. One was Barry Wesley, who's an offensive lineman that probably gets cut otherwise. And one was John Ridgway, who's a defensive tackle who probably gets cut otherwise. I was a little concerned that one of those two players was going to be one of or both of Alontae Taylor and Trevor Penning. You get two. You only get two early IR spots, which means you can put them on IR to return, and you don't have to carry them onto the active roster. That's a change they made starting last year. And so, like, if Trevor had landed on there prior to the season, that would have been like, man, okay, he is going to be out a while. In this case, I think he is going to be back in the first month of the season. It's just a question of week 1 versus week 2. And we talked about this on Sports Talk a couple of days ago. Like, foot injuries are tough for anybody. They're especially tough for 300-pound offensive linemen who have to anchor and put a ton of pressure on those feet. And like, that's why you have those injuries in the first place. So like, I am okay with them not rushing him back to play week 1 if they're not comfortable with him rushing back to play week 1, because I need him for the season. I don't need him to get there at week 1, re-aggravate it. Like you're talking about ligaments. Anytime you have a ligament injury, the re-injury risk is high. So like, take whatever time is needed. Dylan Radins is going to play if not for Trevor. I think as far as backups go, I think that's probably the best backup situation they have. Right? Like, as far as drop off, like if you have to go to a backup tackle, you drop off immensely. If you have to go to a backup center, you drop off immensely. Right? I actually think Dylan Radins at left guard, we don't know we were going to get out of Penning. Right? That was kind of a wild card in and of itself. So like, I'm not at this point, we don't know whether Dylan is actually better at guard than Trevor would be, because it's just a mystery. So like, I think they're okay with that as it goes. But if you get an injury to Dylan, I don't know. So just something to watch.
And speaking of that guard spot, I just need Ruiz to kind of snap out of it. And he had a rough preseason.
I'm okay with Ruiz. I think people are overreacting to Ruiz. I think he plays much better when Eric is next to him. And I think everyone plays better. Man. I think everyone plays better with Eric next to him. And like, there's plays that I see people saying Ruiz is terrible. And it's like, you talk to people who know stuff about the offensive line, like, that's not on Caesar. He's just the closest one to the play because someone else screwed up and he's trying to get over there to make a play on it. Like the Jaguars game, like everyone was getting on Caesar. Like one of the plays, Kendre missed a block. Kendre blew a protection and Caesar comes over trying to rescue the play. And you don't see Kendre, but you see Caesar, so you blame Caesar. And it's, Marcus Williams used to be like that. Marcus Williams had such great range that there would be a big play downfield and he would end up being the closest guy to it because he worked all the way across the field to try to make a play. But it's like, that wasn't his play to make. And to a certain extent, you're better off just letting it go and not being in the frame, because then you're not going to get criticized for not making the play. So I'm not as concerned about Caesar as a lot of people are. Has he been a first round pick value at guard? Probably not. But I'm more worried about Trevor at left guard than I am about Caesar at right guard. Either way, like, you're still in a little bit of trouble. Like, you need that group to play well. Justin Blackman, Julian Blackman, I keep doing that. Julian Blackman and Jordan Howden have also been dealing with injuries, so that'll be one to watch. Julian did leave early in the game against the Broncos. But the last thing I want to talk about before we move on, we had Drew Brees on the show on Sports Talk on Thursday, and mostly to talk about, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. But he also had, I thought, an interesting answer on kind of the state of the Saints in 2025. And so let's listen to it.
I think we've prided ourselves a lot on stopping the run, especially over the last 7-8 years. And we've got veteran guys, leaders that have been a part of this and really the core part of this for a long time. Demario Davis, Cam Jordan. I think we've drafted really well. And we've got pieces in place and depth in place on the defensive side of the ball and guys that are hungry and ready to make a name for themselves. Look, offensively, I think we have as good an offensive line as anybody in the league. We have explosive receivers outside. We've got one of the most dynamic running backs in the league. So you'd say, really, hey, the thing you're waiting to see is how does the quarterback position perform, right? For guys that are just young and don't have a lot of experience. I think Spencer Rattler is extremely talented, and he can make all the throws. and he can make a lot of plays outside the pocket as well. I think what you're just hoping for is that he can continue to grow and develop and understand, hey, what really wins and loses games in this league, and how do we put ourselves in the best position to win, each and every Sunday, given the fact that we're going to have a defense that's going to take pride in stopping the run. We've got the ability to run the football ourselves and the ability to make some explosive plays. But at this point, like, who in the division really scares you? Nobody scares me in the division. Tampa's got the edge because they've been the division winner the last couple of years, and they've got the most veteran quarterback. But other than that, I mean, who really worries you? I think this whole division is wide open. I think the Saints are flying under the radar, and I think that's a good place to be right now.
Very positive about the offensive line.
Yeah, so that's my question. So do you agree with Drew? Like, how do you react to Drew Brees' rose-colored glasses take?
When it happened, we were talking to him. I looked over at Mike Detillier when he was talking about the offensive line, and I was like, our offensive line, one of the best in the NFL? I mean, you're hoping that's the case with the investment that's been made, but there's no proof to that yet. And voice concerns about this in the past episodes from what we've seen at camp in the preseason, just back to that interior. That seems to be the biggest issue. I'm not concerned about the tackles at all, except if there's an injury. But right now, I'm just worried about what's going to happen at those two guard spots, since there's been issues early on with the pressure coming on a young quarterback right in their face.
Yeah, my issue with Drew's take is kind of like when he says, "Hey, I played with these guys," and it's like, you kind of did, but you also kind of didn't. Like, I agree with points that he's making, but I disagree with the conclusion drawn, which is that, like, I do think that the NFC South is a much weaker division than people are giving it credit to be. Like, I don't think that this division is going to be any more difficult to win this year than it has been the last 3 years. I don't think the Bucs got better. I don't think the Falcons got better. I think the Panthers got better, but all that does is put them in the middle with everybody else. Now, Michael Penix should play better. It's his second year. Like, you would expect him to take a step, but I could just as easily see him taking a step back, right? Like, nothing he did over the final 7 of the games was conclusive to me.
Right.
The Bucs, I think, have been playing with house money the last 2 years, and we'll see. Like, is this a year Mike Evans kind of falls back? And they did draft the rookie out of Ohio State, but, like, I don't know. Like, that team has not dominated anybody, even in years where the division was pathetic, right? Like, your 4-year stretch of winning the South, the last 3 years have been 8, 9, and 10 wins. So that's not. So I agree with him on that front. Like, the NFC South is winnable. I also agree with him that, like, I do think this defense is going to be better than people give it credit for. I do think the offensive line should be good. Sure. Now, will it be? I don't know. But they invested in it. So, like, from an investment perspective, like, yeah, you spend 4 first-round picks and a high second-round pick on your offensive line. Should be good. Let's see what happens. Alvin Kamara, I think Alvin's going to be fine. The pass catchers, I think the pass catchers are in good shape. But, he kind of glossed over the most important thing, which is, like, the reason no one's high on the Saints is because their biggest question mark is at the most important position. So, like, yeah, all those other things can be better than people are maybe giving it credit for. But if the quarterback doesn't work out, then it's going to be bad.
Maybe
right?
Drew's thinking about things with him under center.
Yeah. I think sometimes he forgets how much he masked. Like, when he analyzes the team, he's used to analyzing the team around him. And a good team around Drew Brees is a much different scenario than what you have to create a good team around a Spencer Rattler or a young quarterback or a non-Hall of Famer, right? Like, he needs to be supported, and you need a much better supporting cast than he might think you do. And that's kind of, I'm glad you said that, because I think that kind of distills it. Like, what Drew Brees views as a winning roster is different because he's used to him being on it. And when you take him out of it, it's not a winning roster anymore. Like, you look at some of the teams Drew won with, and this group and these quarterbacks aren't winning with that group, right? But at the same time, like, good. I'd like someone to be optimistic. I'm so tired of all the doom and gloom all the time. So I'm glad Drew's out there at least doing that for me.
What I was surprised too, and we've heard this take from him before. He went on the Up and Adams show with Kay Adams and was talking about how he wished the Saints would have done more and focused on building an offense around Taysom Hill at quarterback and giving him that opportunity more.
He's been saying that for years. You know, and that's on Sean, man. Like, Sean chose not to do that. Sean chose to, you know, and I think Taysom and Sean have a good relationship, but Sean had the opportunity to build an offense around Taysom Hill. No one stopped him. He chose to bring in Jameis Winston.
Yep.
And go the Jameis Winston route, right? So, you know.
Which was after Sean even called Taysom Hill a newer version of Steve Young, which made us all go, what?
And if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Sean. And even Sean said no. So,
yeah, right.
It is what it is. Too late now. It's not happening now. But all right, that's going to end the rundown segment. We're going to come back, talk about the offense, roster cuts, biggest concerns, biggest surprises, stuff like that. Who dat? Go Saints. Again, Inside Black Gold. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Giller. We will be right back. And we are back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We went through all the news, the quote-unquote news. So let's get through the roster. You know, the Saints cut down to 53. The initial 53 is not the 53 we have because two guys who made the roster have been displaced by Trey Palmer and Xavier Truss, wide receiver, very tall interior offensive lineman. Xavier Truss, the Saints now have 2 6'7" guards on the roster. But, you know, and Cedric Wilson and Jack Stoll have been sent down to the practice squad. It's just funny because Jack Stoll, I think, is your number 2 tight end. And the guy you have on the roster is probably behind him significantly. Like, I don't think it's even that close. Like, Jack Stoll is going to be a much bigger part of your offense than Maliki Mataval, but he kept Maliki Mataval because he's on that rookie contract and Jack is a good team player and is willing to do whatever. But I want to start by talking about the quarterbacks. And the first thing I'll go to is we have sound effects now. We're stepping up. So, oh, is there a snake in here? It's no, it's just Spencer Rattler, your starting quarterback. And you know, I've talked this to death about the quarterback. So, what's your take? Like, where are you on this? Do you think they made the right call? I know you before the cutdowns were like, hey, I kind of just want to see the rookie. You know, how did you react when Kellen came out and made that announcement? Kind of by surprise on Tuesday. He wasn't originally supposed to talk to the media on Tuesday. I have some theories as to why it happened when it did. But, you know, when he made the announcement, what were your thoughts? How have you kind of come to, you know, has your take evolved at all over the last couple of days? Like, where are you?
Yeah, I was going just to be contrarian and make things more interesting for us, going with, you know, Tyler Shough and trying to put that out there. But I'm with you in lockstep with the fact that I thought Spencer Rattler not only was the right choice, but it was pretty evident what we saw with the practices, with the preseason, the body of work he put together, that he deserves this shot again at the starting gig. And we've been saying it doesn't mean that you're not going to see Tyler Shough at all this season, but at least to start the year, you're going to roll with Rattler under helm and see what he can do. And I don't know. I like what Spencer Rattler brings from that figurehead of a leader in the QB room or into the offense. I feel he carries himself well, and you know he's got a little bit of that. You got swag factor to him, whatever you want to call it. And I just want to see now if he can get the rest of the guys around him to rally and help them be better players, and you know be that distributor of the football. Especially when we get in the red zone situations and getting more into the end zone instead of settling for those field goals. But overall, I think it was the right choice. I'm confident in Spencer Rattler, I guess, as much as you could be going in as the week 1 starter.
Yeah, red zone, I think, is my biggest concern for him. And I just don't think he executes particularly well in that part of the field. Or not even red zone, but like 30 and in, right? Like even 35 and in. Like once you get into field goal range, it just feels like he tightens up a little bit because it's like, well, I have 3 points. I want to make sure I get the 3 points. So, I'm not taking any risks. And I don't know. Like I think that's probably my biggest concern. And you're just it's going to be tough to beat teams if you're trying to win 15-9. Right. And I think the defense is going to keep games low scoring, but you need at least 1 or 2 touchdown drives, like legitimate touchdown drives a game to win consistently. You don't need 5. And field goal drives are not the end of the world, but you can have 3 field goal drives. If you add a touchdown to that, suddenly you're talking about 16, 17 points and you're right there in a range to potentially win a game. If all you have are 5 field goal drives, then you're just not, that's just not a recipe to win. So it's kind of my concern with him. But one of the funny things about this type of news for the Saints is it forces national people. I tweeted about this. Like it forces national people to talk about the Saints because it's major news. It's a named quarterback. But then it becomes apparent really quickly that like so many people just don't pay attention to what's going on with the Saints. And I don't necessarily blame them, but it's always funny because like so much of the reaction was like surprised. And that's only the case if you just weren't tracking any of it. Because if you had talked to one person around the team, they've been like, yeah, I mean, Tyler's progressed well, but I think they're going to go with Spencer. Like anyone who's kind of clued in would have told you that. And a couple people like yourself might have been like, I'd rather just see him go with Tyler. But even that's kind of qualified with, but they're probably going to go with Spencer. And so it's just kind of funny to watch the reaction, especially the fantasy football reaction. People are like, wow, I can't believe this happened.
I feel like, so yeah, like you mentioned, people figure that, oh my gosh, they spent this 2nd-round pick on Tyler Shough, and now they're not even starting him.
Exactly. And that could just, it kind of erases like it. I don't know. And
they should have gone Shador.
And I understand it because like when the Saints are bad, people tune out. When the Giants are bad, people talk about them anyway. And the Saints are just like, there's small market teams get ignored when they're not good. Like the Saints were getting attention when they were good, but the second that goes away, they kind of like disappear from the national conversation. Either way, like I think Kellen made the right call. And that is like, I think people a lot of times will confuse impatience with being practical and being like, well, this makes more sense. And it's like, no, sitting for a month and learning at the NFL level makes more sense.
Right.
A lot of people just don't have the patience to do that. Teams end up in situations where it just doesn't make sense to do that because you drafted a guy in the top 5 or you just don't have a quarterback that played well enough to justify putting ahead of him. But like any coach, given the opportunity to allow a young quarterback to develop at the NFL level, would want to do that. And I appreciate that Kellen feels confident enough in his own aura to not be forced to be like, well, we drafted this guy, we got to do it. Like it's a practical situation that I think Spencer gives you a better chance to win week 1, because that is the goal, whether people want to admit it or not. And B, if he plays great, fantastic. If he doesn't, then you have a very easy on-ramp to a rookie who then has a better chance to succeed. So I have no issue with it. Plus, it's a cool story for Spencer. Like, I don't think, we should be ignoring the fact. Like, yeah, it feels like he has kind of a short runway. But at the end of the day, like, this is an opportunity that not a lot of 5th-rounders get. So I'm excited to see him out there. This is Spencer on WWL chatting with Mike Detillier and Charlie Long earlier this week after the announcement. And, he's kind of breaking down, hey, what have you kind of worked on this offseason? Where have you improved? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think just that pocket presence. I feel like I've always had a, natural feel for the pocket, but I think, just tightening up footwork, knowing how to get the ball out quicker, playing a little more decisive with your eyes and your progressions. And, I think it's hard to practice, decision-making and all of that in the off season, but I think having practices and getting preseason games and getting those more reps, I think we've done a good job of protecting the ball and, taking what the defense gives you. But kind of like what you said, I mean, there's no better way to get better than being in the fire and getting those real live reps. So, we're still growing day to day, but, like where the game's at now, just want to keep working.
Spencer, one thing that Bobby Hebert mentioned throughout the process of selecting the starting quarterback was that the team knew who the guy was throughout the preseason as it kind of progressed, and that they just needed the announcement to be able to rally behind that guy ahead of week 1 against Arizona, which is just less than 2 weeks away. I just want to get your thoughts on what the team has kind of said to you since the announcement's been made, other players kind of approaching you and congratulating you on winning that starting QB job. And now kind of it's time to get to work, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, guys are focused, guys are excited, but we know there's a big task ahead this year for us, and I think we all got the same mindset of, hey, we're ready to attack. Guys are excited about this and that, but we're excited to play together. We're excited to get out there week 1 and get this thing.
Yeah, and so what I'll say for Spence is, I think the 0-6 talking point is an unfair talking point. In that, I think it's fair to look at his year last year and say, he didn't do this well. He didn't do this well. This is where he needed to be better. He was a rookie. He looked overwhelmed at this point or another point. He wasn't consistent enough. He had a good half and then a bad second half, or a good quarter and then a bad second quarter, whatever. There's a lot you can criticize, but just throwing 0-6 out there, it's a definitive, he doesn't have it without the context. That's an unfair talking point. And that's a disingenuous argument as to why you shouldn't give him a chance this year. Now, all that said, that's not going to be the case. Week 1, week 2, week 3, however long you go with him, this is his chance, and he's not going to be able to look back and say, hey, I didn't have the receivers, I didn't have the offensive line, I didn't have whatever, because he's going to have that. So whatever ends up happening, this will be a true analysis of what he can be at the NFL level. Whereas last year, I just don't feel like you ever got, you got data points and you got information to use, but you didn't get an answer. This year, you're going to get an answer, and whatever it is what it is.
Yeah, last year you definitely put the incomplete by any grade you want to give him. That's why, like you mentioned, there's going to be none of that going into week 1. Thankfully, the wide receivers, the O-line pretty much healthy going into the season to start things out. And interesting for him getting to take on the Arizona Cardinals, obviously being an Arizona guy. So, he mentioned that, I know too, the fact that kind of taking on the home team where he grew up, and a little something extra to prove out there. I don't know. Look for any kind of momentum or any kind of motivation you need out there.
Yeah, and it was also this Cardinals he got his first preseason start against last year. So this happens to be the Cardinals, right? And so the other question is, how does Tyler Shough take this? I don't think it one of the things that he said that I actually appreciate is that the quarterbacks didn't know that the news was coming on Tuesday. They were kind of just doing their thing, and then they got called into Kellen Moore's office individually. They sat down, they had the meeting, and then they had a team meeting after that. So if you were wondering whether this had been kind of decided within the building and everyone knew, and it was just a matter of them telling the media, I don't think that was the case. And I think Tyler is generally pretty honest. I don't think that he's a guy that's going to go out there and just lie to people. I think they genuinely didn't know. They might have had an idea that I'm sure Spencer felt like he had done enough, just like a lot of people watching it had felt like he had done enough. But until that decision was made, it could have gone either way. And honestly, Kellen had a chance to make a lot of people look dumb if he had gone with Tyler, because, I know Jeff Duncan put out a column saying I'm deciding this is the quarterback. I had been pretty open. It's Spencer's going to win the job. But he could have just been you know what, whatever. Either way, I did ask. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was pretty impressed that when the news came out, Tyler Shough's agent took to social media and says, I like the plan. That to me said a lot.
Yeah, well, I think they understand. Right. A quarterback wants to win that job week 1, but at the same time, you tell him, hey, I think you need a little bit more time. And it's not about, if he doesn't play all 17 games, we're not going to know what he's over a 17-game season. It's no, you need to, when you inevitably get in the game, you need to deliver. So as a young quarterback being told, hey, we still want you to be our starting quarterback. We just want you to be prepared fully when you get in there. That's not you can take that as an insult, but I think in a lot of cases you should be cool. This takes the pressure off me a little bit, right? And we'll see. But I asked Tyler about that. How do you change from being a starter to being a backup? Is that a flip you switch, a switch you flip? I always do that backwards. A flip you switch.
Yeah.
A switch you flip. A switch you flip.
Yep.
And I appreciated his answer. So this is what he said. Is that going to be kind of a difficult mental switch just to go from competing every day to now I'm the backup? Like, how do you handle that?
In my head, I'm still competing every day. I think everything is evaluation, especially in this league. You know, you never know what can happen. You know, I think at the end of the day, my job is to support Spencer, and that's me competing and do everything I can to practice well as I can, give great looks, to learn, to grow, to continue to offer support. So that's all part of it.
Yeah, and I think the change comes in you're no longer directly competing with that guy, but you're still competing. Like because you don't know. Like, it could be week 1. Like, Spencer could get hit from the blind side and get hurt and you're in, right? It could be week 3 where things go so badly in weeks 1 and 2 that they're just like, you know what, we're going to make a change. It could be week 10. It could be week 12. It could be week 16. Like, you don't know, but your job now is to be ready for whenever you go in there. So, like, if you're going to sit there and sulk, all that does is make it so when you do get in, it could be next year. But if if your plan is to sit there and sulk because, I didn't get the starting quarterback job, like, then you're just hurting yourself in the long run. So I think, like what I've said throughout, like, I like his approach. I like his mental situation. I think he's approaching things the right way. Like, I think that's just another example of that.
I'm still surprised, too, of how many Saints fans we hear clamoring for the team to bring in a veteran quarterback, and I don't understand it at all, what good that does this team.
Come on, they have Jake Haener on the practice squad. What else do you want?
and Deckers, but he's a rookie, too.
And Deckers. I always get a kick out of people being like, I can't believe they brought Jake Haener back. And I'd be like, why? Why wouldn't they? What are you looking for out of a third quarterback if it's not a guy on a cheap contract who knows your offense? Like,
my question with the biggest thing with the veteran quarterback, who is out there that you think you're bringing in? That's the biggest thing.
And like, that's why they have all the former quarterbacks on the coaching staff, right? Like, they have those guys. They don't need people want them to trade for Jameis. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, they don't want
stop. Right.
But that's what that is. So let's wrap this up on the quarterbacks. Let's take a quick break right here. Come back, finish out on the offense, ask a couple questions inside Black and Gold. Stick around. All right, and we are back. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. You know, the offense, I didn't think there was a lot of surprising cuts on the 53. I kind of felt like it is what it is. You know, the running back room went how I expected. The wide receiver room went how I expected. So you kept Alvin Kamara, obviously, Devin Neal, Velus Jones, and Kendre Miller. I think the depth chart there is pretty obvious. The only surprise cut was Clyde, who I was hoping you would get on the practice squad. You weren't able to get him back. He went out to Kansas City. Cam Akers, it kind of feels like I'm curious. You know, I don't know this for sure, but he did tweet about it. Like, NFL is a crazy place, whatever. And I think if I'm Cam, I'm a little annoyed just because, hey, I was here working all camp. That guy was hurt. And you kept him anyway, and you tell us we're supposed to earn jobs. Like, I did all the work. And I don't know. Like, I would be a little annoyed if I was Cam.
That small sample size we saw of Devin Neal, at least you saw positive production there. Cam never really had anything that you went, oh, wow, I see something.
Yeah, I'm not saying the Saints were wrong doing what they did. I'm just saying if I'm Cam Akers, I'm annoyed because, like, I did all I could. Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
But that's the reality of the NFL, right? When you have a draft pick, a young player who has more upside, they're going to get kept, you know, and we'll see. Cam hasn't signed at any practice squad yet, but that's not surprising. The wide receiver room with Devon Vele, suddenly you have a ton of wide receivers. And I actually feel pretty good about the wide receiver room just in general. Like, and people got mad about the asset they gave up to get Devon Vele, a 4th round pick and a future 7th round pick. They also traded a future pick to get Akeem Richards, but it was a 2028 6th rounder in exchange for a 2028 7th rounder. So that's like, when you talk about like what's the least you can possibly give up in a trade, I think that's it. Like, of actual value is you turned a 6th into a 7th. You didn't even give up a pick. You just moved back however far, like 40 spots at the end of day 3 anyway. But no, I mean, so you have in that room right now, you have Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Devon Vele, and I do believe that's your top 3. Brandon Cooks. I know a lot of people have told me, hey, why don't they cut Cooks? They're not cutting Cooks. There's too much money invested in Cooks, and he's the veteran leader in that room. Like, you're not cutting him. And then Mason Tipton, a guy who made himself uncuttable. Trey Palmer, And then obviously Cedric Wilson down on the practice squad and Kevin Austin down the practice squad as well. So I don't if you just erase the asset you gave up, I think plugging Devon Vele in there and having that big body guy along with all the speed guys, suddenly I think this wide receiver room is in really good shape.
Definitely hoping that Vele's that piece that, that he has a skill set that nobody else on that wide receiver core has, and that's because of his size. And hopefully that contested catch, he becomes that guy for them and a nuisance in the red zone.
Ultimately, we always like to compare it to like a basketball team, right? There's different sizes in the starting five. There's different ways to approach it. And so you're continuing to try and create matchups as you go. Naturally, there's usually a tier system to this. There's usually, ones, twos, threes, fours, whatever it may be. What percentage each guy plays has been different in every place. We've been places where we've leaned really heavy into just the one and the two, and other places maybe a little more balanced. And I do think the depth is going to be really valuable for us as the season goes on. We got 8 guys currently in the receiver room, and all those guys are going to be playing on Sundays, and we're going to feel great about all 8 of them.
Yeah, that's a lot of people in a wide receiver room, right? But no, I think that like you check again, like that basketball lineup, they spent all offseason talking about how they didn't feel like that was like a problem, but it was a problem, and the trade tells you how much they viewed it as a problem. But no, I mean, like you could probably talk about like, hey, do they have a true number one? And I'm not sure if they do. We're going to find out this year exactly what Chris Olave has to offer. But you have a lot of capable playmakers. And like, go compare it, just for example, go compare it to 2021, right? When you had Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway and Deontay Harris and now Hardy. And I would argue that the top 4 in this room are better than any of the wide receivers you had in 2021.
Yeah, you rattle off those names there, kind of made me shudder.
Right. So, so the 2 questions I have, and then I'll let you answer this and we can go.
Yeah.
Biggest surprise, biggest concern. Let's start with kind of your biggest surprise and go from there.
The fact that they haven't done the biggest surprise is not adding anyone with the tight end group yet. There's still a ton of questions there. We'll, see what happens with, like you mentioned, you feel like Stoll is that number 2 guy on the practice squad right now. I'm sure they'll do plenty of maneuvering for game days, but definitely not really confident in that group at all behind Juwan.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm not even going to bother asking your biggest concern because I think the answer is the same, right? Like, I think your biggest surprise is also your biggest concern in that if Juwan gets hurt,
yeah,
the whole position rots.
And then you could also say depth at the offensive line, but we've talked about this a ton too. I think depth along the O-line is everyone's concern. Every team.
The only reason I would say like it's not necessarily the biggest concern of the team is because I think that's just the life in the NFL right now. Like I think you could go around a lot of teams and say, man, if you lose 2 or 3 starters on the offensive line, are you going to be okay? And the answer is going to be no. Like very few teams find themselves in a position going into a season where you have capable backups at all 5 offensive line spots. You'd like to have more than the Saints have, but yeah, I mean, that's just health. But no, I agree with you. Tight end, like you have Trayton Welch on the practice squad. Like I like Trayton Welch.
Yeah.
But if he ends up, if Juwan goes down and you have to end up having to turn to Trayton Welch as kind of like your number 1 in terms of pass catching, because both Jack Stoll and Maliki Matavao, which both have skill sets that I appreciate, but both are blocking tight ends. So like the only guy on your roster who would be kind of a viable receiving tight end past Juwan would be Trayton Welch.
Yeah, nothing's set in stone with the roster yet, but it was kind of surprising that they weren't adding a body there.
Yeah, and the guy I thought maybe they'd go after was Greg Dulcich, who didn't get claimed on waivers, ended up signing with the Dolphins. I mean, they put a lot of stock in Sean Payton's review of players, and for good reason. I think he gives them an honest feedback on players. Like he's not going to lie to them and be like, "Oh, don't get Greg Dulcich. He doesn't need him. Like he's gone." So like I wouldn't be surprised if like Sean moved off of him, right? Like they drafted Greg Dulcich and then let him go. So clearly it didn't work out there. Meanwhile, like it's like the guard that they cut, like the Saints were all over, right? The receiver that they didn't have a spot for, the Saints were all over. So
meanwhile, Denver's got Lucas Kroll and who's the other one? Oh, Troutman, Adam Troutman.
Yeah, Kroll was the guy I wanted. If they had cut Kroll, I would have been like, give me freaking Lucas Kroll, man. Anyway, but that's going to be it. Any other notes on the offense before we move on?
Just hoping. We talked a little bit about some of the injuries. Taliesin Fuaga, we haven't heard much about his knee issue. Hoping it is minor. Back in
practice.
He was okay.
Yeah,
that's great to hear.
Yeah, the only guys missing from practice were the obvious guys, plus Christian Boyd, who we could talk about in the next segment, and then the safeties, Blackman and Howden, and then Penning and Alante.
Yeah, that's huge because Fuaga, you look at the step down there that you would have to go to, and it's a huge drop off.
Yeah, like again, if you have 4 of your starters on offensive line and the only fill-in is the veteran who's replacing the biggest question mark you had anyway,
it's not terrible.
It's not the end of the world. That's why I'm not overreacting to the Penning injury, right? Like if you took that injury off of Trevor and put it on to Eric and said, Luke Fortner is our week 1 starting center, I'd be like, this is a problem.
You should have hit the scream sounder there when you said McCoy getting injured. That was week 3 when he went down against the Eagles.
And then if he misses time, this is how the Saints season will go.
It just keeps going there. Man, it's getting rough in here.
Yeah, sorry. I have a soundboard now. Eat your heart out. But all right, that's going to wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. We're going to do the same thing, but for defense. It'll be a shorter one because you don't have quarterbacks to talk about. There's no such thing as a quarterback on defense. Even though we call players the quarterback of the defense, there's no such thing. Fact. But all right, Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller, Inside Black and Gold. Stick around. And we are back. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. Wow, that was poorly executed. Steve Geller coming back at you one more segment. Still breaking down the roster, kind of. We're not going through position by position, but we are talking about kind of our biggest notes, surprises, concerns. Went through a lot on the offense, quarterback, wide receiver, whatever. Defense, I thought there were a few more surprise cuts, but not like wholly surprising. Just, okay, that's an interesting choice, blah, blah, blah. Like, linebacker, I thought, was the strongest position going in from a depth perspective, and I feel like that take was proven true. Not in the sense that they kept more linebackers than I thought, but that the guys who came into camp lower on the depth chart supplanted more secure names, right? And that tells you just how much this team likes guys like Isaiah Stallbird, Jalen Ford, both made the roster. Whereas, veteran players, DeMarco Jackson, Nephi Sewell, they ended up out of town. Nephi ended up back on the practice squad. Dennis Allen got his way out in Chicago and brought in DeMarco Jackson, which not a surprise to me at all. Like, DeMarco was the first player Dennis Allen drafted. Or that's not true. DeMarco Jackson was part of Dennis Allen's first draft class as head coach for the Saints. So, like, that guy, if you're trying to install a defense, it's not a bad guy to bring in to help translate it to people, even this late in the game, because there's going to be game planning stuff that goes in throughout the season that he can help with. So, but that's where you are. And so you have, like, I still, like, even without DeMarco and Nephi, like, Demario Davis, Pete Werner, I think Demario Davis is still playing at a very, 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 very high level. Like, it's stupid how good he still is at 36 years old.
With no DeMarco, though, who do you feel is would be behind Demario Davis now for that, in his role?
Stutzman.
That's huge.
Yeah, I think Stutzman is kind of the third, is your backup Mike linebacker, and Jalen Ford is your backup Will linebacker. But I saw Jalen Ford, relaying calls, wearing the green dot. So I think both of those guys could potentially fill in as your Mike. But in the 3-4, it's like, it's not as, like, you obviously have one guy playing weak side, one guy playing strong side, but it's not as significant a difference as your weak side backer versus strong side backer in a 4-3, where you're more filling gaps in this scheme as opposed to a much more intensive role adjustment in the 3-4 versus 4-3. So it's really just more of a question of who's got the green dot and relaying those calls. Either way, I've seen both of them do it. And then beyond that, Isaiah Stallbird, a guy that has just been like a heat-seeking missile in training camp and the preseason. So feel really good about that.
Stutzman, though, to have that confidence in the rookie.
Oh, no doubt. Well, I mean, we haven't seen him play it. We'll see what happens if they get into a situation where they have to play these guys. But this was Brandon Staley talking about Stallbird and Ford the other day when he spoke to the media.
I think both of those guys from, I would say, the end of the springtime to the other night just made a lot of consistent improvement. And I think that when Jalen got back on the field at the end of the springtime, I think we were able to see someone who had been paying attention. And that's not easy when you're not getting reps. And so I think that he was able to really apply all those lessons on the field right away, which gave a good early sign for him. And then I think with their opportunities in the training camp, they just consistently improved throughout the whole camp. And I think demonstrated the aptitude, both from a football intelligence standpoint, running the show and being a pro linebacker, and then having the physicality and toughness, and then the playmaking. I think there was playmaking that was consistent for both of those guys, both on defense and on special teams. And we kind of feel like those guys are the right guys to be coaching.
Man, Brandon Staley could read audiobooks. Man has a beautiful voice. It's so soothing. I just like listening to him talk. He also gives very good, you hear him talking that's a former head coach.
Right.
Right. Sometimes you get the coordinate, like Clint last year was just man, this is tough. This is tough to get through. But he gives long, detailed answers. You actually feel like you're getting information. Anyway, I like Brandon Staley. I think he's a good defensive coordinator, and there's good reasons for that.
No, that's why I do like that combo of Kellen and Staley.
Yeah, no, seriously, I think it's if this is a duo, what I like about it is it's not if this goes really well, then one of these guys is getting poached next year. No, this is a duo, much like Sean Payton and DA, that it could be a 6-7 year partnership. So hopefully it does go well because you keep both of those guys. And you don't have to reset, because if you build and build and build, then you're in good shape. What I appreciate about that answer, B, the decisions in the cuts, is this offseason was a lot more about who earned the jobs than draft investment, right? You saw that at quarterback. You saw that at defensive end, edge rusher, where you cut Isaiah Foskey and kept a Chris Rumpf and then cut your own draft pick and Fadil Diggs, right? This at this position where DeMarco Jackson was a 5th round pick, right? He was an investment. It was on the final year of his deal, but he was also a 4th year player. Okay, but you felt like Jalen Ford and Isaiah Stallbird were playing better. Same thing with Nephi Sewell. So you kept them, Rajon Wright at cornerback. He played really well. He earned it. And none of these guys were drafted by this staff. A lot of them were kept around as holdovers from the previous staff, but they didn't have any reason to look at these guys and be well, they did it before. This was a kind of a reset in a lot of different ways. And it's nice because you should have to earn your spot. There's certain guys that you get drafted in the 3rd round, like a Vernon Broughton, you kept him. And I think that was more so we're developing this young player. We picked him. We have to give him the space to develop. But outside of that, I feel like everyone who was kept on the roster was kept because they earned that spot, which is what you want to see. I think as a player, that's what you want. And again, we go back to Cam Akers. I think one of the reasons if I'm Cam Akers, I'm annoyed is because I don't know, I kind of feel like I did the work. I earned the spot, but he gave it to the guy who was hurt. But that's where I am. But that's why I appreciate Stallbird earned a spot. And the only question was whether the team was going to agree that it was worth supplanting a more entrenched player.
No, and you mentioned with Stallbird being that heat-seeking missile, and it was definitely exciting to see him on the field, and looking forward to, come regular season, more of his contributions. You need that energy, that juice, that, seek and destroy kind of mentality there. And I don't know, for the defensive rundown, there really wasn't any major surprises, except for, like you mentioned, with Diggs, but he ended up coming back at least to the practice squad there. So not like you would say a quote unquote wasted draft pick. He's still on the roster right now.
Right. And another example of a guy earning a spot, Ugo Amadi. Right. Brandon Staley had every reason in the world to go with Terrell Burgess over Ugo Amadi. Brandon Staley was the reason Terrell Burgess got drafted to the Rams in 2020. Terrell Burgess knows Brandon Staley's system. if I'm Brandon Staley, when I bring that guy in, and I'm like, what if Alontae Taylor gets hurt? Who's going to be my guy? Like, it's got to be Terrell, but Ugo just played well. Ugo was just produced, and Terrell did deal with an injury. Maybe that was a factor. Terrell is on the practice squad, so he's still around. But Ugo Amadi was not a guy that you signed in this offseason because you expected to have a significant role. And he might end up being your week 1 starter at the star position, the nickel corner spot. So
it seems that way. I wouldn't want to put the rookie and Quincy Riley in there.
No, he's not. And Jonas Sanker, it's too important a position from an IQ perspective, like from a football understanding perspective, to throw a rookie in there. It's not to say these guys don't know what they're doing, but you're asking a lot out of those players. And I think Sanker's probably your backup strong safety. Quincy Riley is probably the first corner off the bench if one of Kool-Aid or Ike gets hurt or misses time. Quincy's the first guy off the bench, and then it would be Rajon. If one of Reed or Blackman misses time, it would be Sanker and then Howden. But no, Ugo is your starting nickel corner if Alante's not there, and there's no question in my mind. And I like sending him on. They've sent him on a lot of green dog blitzes, which I appreciate. And then what that means is hey, you have the back coming out of the backfield or the tight end. And if the tight end stays into block, so you have that guy in coverage, and if they keep the back end to pick up a blitz, right? You're not just kind of floating around in space. You're going you're there. It's not a called blitz, but the guy you're accounting for out of the backfield is not coming out. And so you're just going straight at the quarterback. It's called a green dog blitz. And you see it a lot from him, and it works in part because you can't see that guy. He's so small. One of the reasons you target him downfield is because he's small. But one of the reasons he's able to kind of catch quarterbacks kind of off guard is he comes out of nowhere, and you'd like a big thumping safety, but you have to use what you have to your advantage. And I think Brandon Staley's system, one of its major bonuses, one of the major pluses for his system is that it's very versatile, and you have the ability within it to play in a lot of different ways and take advantage of the strengths of individual players. And I think one of Ugo's strengths is the ability to blitz. So yeah.
No, and overall, for me at least, it's kind of surprising to say this, but there's no Tyrann Mathieu anymore. We know Paulson Adebo, Marshawn Lattimore, guys are gone. I feel better about the defense going into this year. They look a lot stronger than last season, and hoping that's a case for sure against the run. We know that was abysmal last year.
Yeah, no question. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm going to skip the biggest surprise because, I think the biggest surprise was cutting Diggs and keeping Rump. We already talked about that.
Yeah.
You traded Colin Saunders, so that really kind of solidified what your interior defensive line was going to be. Christian Boyd is dealing with an injury, but he is your backup nose tackle. You have the 4 defensive ends and Chase Young, Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, and Chris Rump, and I feel good about that group. You have Vernon Broughton, Brian Brzee, Jonathan Bullard, and Nathan Shepard on the interior around the nose tackles, right? But, what the biggest reason I feel good about the run defense is Davon Godchaux is exactly what you need. He's a stud at nose tackle. And I think, people don't know about nose tackles because it's a thankless job. And, like Vince Wilfork is the guy everyone talks about. But even you ask a Patriots fan, you would have to ask a Patriots fan for them to tell you how great Vince Wilfork was. The average person doesn't know who Vince Wilfork is. But I think most Patriots fans would be able to tell you, if they didn't have Vince Wilfork, that defense would have had nothing. And so this is Brandon talking about Davon, but also how important that position is to his defense in general, but specifically the run defense.
Yeah, I think, you got to build your defense up the middle. And I think the way that we want to play, having a guy there like Davon allows everybody to play better. And I think the command that he has in the middle of, not only being able to, I think control double teams, but if he does get a single block, when he gets a single block, he's winning that single block and making the tackle. And so he's not just a space occupier. We feel like he can make a lot of tackles for us, and that's important, that he's going to give you playmaking, run stuffs in there. And so just a very consistent player. And I think having to face him all these years, that's what really stood out to me, is just how consistent he was. Bill and Steve and those guys in New England, they have as high a praise for him as anybody, So I think he's brought that professionalism to us. But again, the playmaking ability and the ability for others to benefit by how he plays in the middle.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw it. Like, go back and watch the first run play against the Broncos, and you see them trying to single block Devon. And I talked about this in the last episode, and I tweeted the clip like I said it would. Like, you can go find it. And it's like the ability to just control a gap and just kind of hold that guy up. And then the running back just wants to, it's like, well, there's nothing there. So I'm going to try to cut back to the other gap. And he's able to just kind of flash across that guy's face and get to the other back gap and shut it down. It's like, if you got one guy who can do that, it's like you can't single team that guy. The only way you're going to be able to run the ball is by double teaming that guy. And that is the win as a nose tackle. If you force a double team, you've won. Now, you still want to like make an impact through that double team if you can. You still want to create kind of havoc and jam some things up. But once they have to double team you, then that means that everyone else has a single block to beat, and the linebackers can come up and fill gaps. And they just haven't had a nose tackle in recent years that even forced teams to think about having to double team you. And obviously they haven't had a nose tackle in general, but you get the idea. They haven't had an interior lineman over the last few years, and on rundowns that force teams to be like, well, we have to send the double there. So what do we do everywhere else?
And the Patriots only wanted a 7th round draft pick back for him.
Change defenses.
Wild.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, only 3-4 defenses really need that guy, but 3-4 defenses need that guy.
Right.
And so the fact that they were able to get a guy like Devon, and also, he's motivated. He's coming home. It's first time playing in the Superdome. It's like, they lucked out, in my opinion. Okay, so one more thing. I'm going to ask you, what, you kind of said it there, but what is your, do you have a big concern for this defensive group? Like, as we go forward, what is kind of as you look at the roster and as you look at how things are set up, what are you kind of like, what do you think you need to see from this group for them to have success?
Well, I guess when you look at, especially too, with the week 1 opponent coming in and Arizona Cardinals having a Kyler Murray at quarterback, is being able to contain that guy. Any of those mobile quarterbacks who have been able to, it seems at least, wreak havoc over this Saints defense in the past years.
Yeah, I mean, you say Kyler Murray, like, look at the Saints schedule and you're like, all right, this guy.
Right.
Even Baker's really good at it. Like, everyone in the NFL, it seems like, is good at it.
Shoot, I did ask Josh Allen too.
Who?
Josh Allen.
Right. I mean, it's like even the teams that don't have guys that you would say like are traditionally, they're not Lamar Jackson, but like they still have even Trevor Lawrence. Like, and I did ask Brandon about that because I am interested how much your scheme has to adjust for it. And I thought he had a good answer. And I also have an aside on the answer too. So let's listen to Brandon. I could listen to Brandon talk all day, man. Let's do it.
A Brandon Stan Brand.
With Bo a little bit, and obviously Kyler's the same way. Like, how much time do you spend trying to factor in quarterbacks that are just going to extend forever? Is that something that you scheme for, or do you just have to kind of handle it within the defense?
Yeah, you got to scheme for it, for sure. That added element of the mobility is a big part of this league, and the best quarterbacks now, you can name one, they all have it. So all those big high leverage downs, third downs, red area, 2-minute, you're going to have to factor that into how you play. So no matter how you're going to rush the quarterback, 4, 5, 6, whatever, that's going to be a big component of the game plan. And so, Bo, that's a great exposure for our guys, getting ready for our first game, but all the other games too that we're going to have to play where the quarterback's a special player with his legs. And, we had good exposure in games 2 and games 1 of the preseason as well with Trevor. And then, Trey Lance, he's a very mobile quarterback too. So that's the thing that you have to do during training camp now is you have to learn, until it's live, you don't really know. And Spencer and Tyler and Jake have given us great looks too. But that's such a big part of finishing plays in the NFL. So yeah, we're going to have to spend a lot of time on it with Kyler for sure.
Okay. So first things first, when I said earlier in the show that like, I think one of the, like they kind of changed course on Tuesday. So in that, within that answer, I think Brandon kind of spilled the beans early that Spencer Rattler was going to be the starter. I only say this because like multiple people were like, did you hear he said Spencer. And he was like, oh, wait, also, but Tyler and Jake. And so the timeline of this was Brandon Staley talked. And it was, you know, he was third, I believe. Like, I can't remember what the order was, but like, it was only supposed to be the coordinators. And then Brandon Staley talked, and it was like, that was the second to last answer. And then like 20 minutes later, the media got a text me like, actually, Kellen's going to talk today. And so my theory is like, Brandon was like, you know, he went up to Kellen and was like, I think I might have spilled the beans here. But no, it's just kind of funny because like,
it's just Kellen loves talking to the media.
It seems like he does. He talks to us all the time. I don't know why. But no, so one of the things you brought up after the first preseason game was, you know, Trey Lance kind of ran him ragged. And my take was like, I'm not going to overreact to that because I do think that this team, when you are preparing for Kyler Murray, you're going to defend a very specific way against Kyler Murray. You're going to defend a very specific way against Josh Allen and how they like to move around and the way they scramble. And you're just not doing that for the Chargers backup, right? You're just kind of running your stuff. And if he wants to kind of scramble and do whatever, he's going to do it. You're not going to lose sleep over it. You'd like to defend it within the scope of your defense, but you're just going to let it happen. That's not going to be the case in week one. So I don't know if we've seen yet exactly how this team will directly attack that part of the game. But I do appreciate the answer because like, I think you have to, like, you can no longer in today's NFL say, this is our defense and we're going to play the mobile quarterbacks within our scheme. Like, no, your scheme has to adapt for that part of the game. And if you're not, your scheme is not going to be effective. And that's one of the reasons I felt like DA kind of, you know, at least like over the last couple of years, like, it's like, why aren't they getting any better at defending mobile quarterbacks? So I think he was just kind of stubbornly devoted to this is how we play. And we're not going to make these like adjustments to our core beliefs and our rules based on individual quarterbacks. But I just think you have to. I really do. And it sounds like Brandon agrees. So that's what I like to hear.
I was just seeing, sorry, I was distracted that seeing the Patriots releasing safety Jabril Peppers.
Saucy, spicy. That's what I meant. I meant to say spicy.
Peppers, yeah, very spicy.
But yeah, like I don't think the Saints are going to be in on him. But no, I mean, like again, like all that is to say, I am very curious to see whether they can be better at defending the run because I think this scheme
can't be worse.
Yeah, they probably can't be worse. But this scheme in general and how you play and how you deploy players should, I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but should
encompassing everything.
Yeah, be more effective in that part of the game, right? Like, and now if they aren't, then it is what it is. But like, that's my hope.
No, we talked about Shough, and I feel like that's that one addition that, not the one, but the biggest one this offseason, I think is going to make the biggest difference for this team. I love it. And yeah, they needed that big dude in the middle. And like, you know, we heard Staley talking about that's essential for his scheme.
Yeah. And you know, like we talk about on offense, like if you lose Juwan Johnson, the drop off is massive to the next tight end.
Yeah.
I think the same thing's probably true for Devon. And I like Christian. I think Christian made Colin Saunders expendable, but it's still a huge drop off. Like they're going to single block that guy and they're going to see what happens. But all right, that's all I got. Anything else you want to throw in there? Oh, we didn't mention the kickers, but yeah, the kickers.
Right. That's where I was going to go.
Charlie Smith is onto the practice squad. Blake is going to kick 90 field goals this year and break every NFL record. Yeah.
And heaven help us with the punter, I guess.
We'll see. Hopefully, Kai bombs. Kai. I'll come up with something. Yeah.
I mean, I know there's guys out there, but I just don't know if it's worth bringing in someone at this point if they're going to really flip things that much.
Sounds like they tried to trade for Corliss Waitman and the Steelers decided to stick with him. The 49ers cut Thomas Morstead, but that was hey, we're going to bring you back kind of situation. And that's exactly what happened. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think we're in for another kind of disappointing punter season, but we'll have to wait and see.
I don't know if you brought it up here or was it on Sports Talk with, you know, Hayball. He wasn't that terrible at, you know, being able to pin people.
Well, Hayball was terrible at being able to pin people. Headley wasn't.
Headley, that's what I meant. Sorry, yeah.
I would be I kind of wish they had just stuck with Headley last year, because then you'd have Headley going into year 3, and ideally he'd have to have some development in year 2. Because he pinned. I have not seen a single one of these kickers, be it Matthew Hayball, be it Kai Kroger, be it James Burnup, pin one kick inside the 10 this camp, right? In an actual competitive scenario.
And Headley's definitely still out there. I was surprised to see no team has him.
He's probably back working at a tattoo parlor or something, or as he says it, tattoo. I always got a kick out of how he said tattoo. The first time we talked to him in the locker room, Luke Johnson asked him about his ink. And he was like, "Oh, my tattoos? Yes, I have several tattoos." I don't have the full Australian accent down. It's just tattoos. I just enjoy saying it.
I'm waiting for more sound effects.
I don't have any good ones.
Said full steam ahead for the season.
I need a second one. I need to figure out that train whistle, because there's got to be 2. What is this one train whistle? What a rip.
Anything's better than the Superdome siren.
True. That is true. And we'll hear it soon enough. Who dat? Go Saints. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been Inside Black and Gold. We're going to take a couple days off with the team. No episode on Monday, but we will be back on Wednesday for a injury report breakdown, first injury report of the week. And then we're going to be starting up our kind of crossover episodes, previewing every game of the season. We got out of it last year after everything kind of went to shit. But
nobody cared, right?
Just didn't seem worthwhile.
Who cares about the matchup? We stink.
Didn't need to talk to a Raiders guest, at that point in the year. But we're gonna keep talking about the games as if they matter until they don't matter anymore. So we're gonna start doing that. We don't have a guest lined up, but that'll be either Thursday or Friday. So keep tuned for that, and then we'll kind of get into our normal schedule with a Monday post game, a Wednesday kind of catch up, and then a preview episode at the end of the week. So, as always, thanks everyone for listening. You can hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can hit Steve up at Steve Geller WWL. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. You can hear Steve on Sports Talk every day over on WWL AM 870 FM 105.3 and the Odyssey app. You can also hear Steve and myself on the pregame show for home games starting at 8 a.m. at the Superdome for noon starts, 4 hours before every kickoff, if you're into that sort of timeline thing. And then when I'm on the road, it's going to be Charlie Long with Steve. You can also catch all the news, notes, and analysis over at WWL.com. Keep up with everything on social media, all that jazz. Did I forget anything, Steve? Is that the entire spiel? I feel like I got most of it.
You got it all. Now we're just ready to enter the snake pit for week 1. Yes!
Chills. I got chills. I remembered to use the soundboard, and I'm excited. All right. Who dat?
Who dat, folks?
Be easy, y'all.